The year was 1942. The global war had reached a terrifying new dimension, shifting from the traditional battlefields of mud and metal to the sterile, high-stakes laboratories of physics. While Allied convoys battled U-boats in the Atlantic, a far graver existential crisis was unfolding: the race to harness atomic energy. In the United States, the massive clandestine Manhattan Project was consuming billions of dollars and the talents of the world's most brilliant minds, all driven by the terrifying mandate to achieve sustained nuclear fission. The fear, the single paralyzing shadow cast over Allied strategic planning, was that Nazi Germany, possessing its own core of genius scientists, Heisenberg, Hahn, and others, and unwavering financial backing of the Reich, might win this race first. The key to the German program, codenamed Uranviron, Uranium Club, lay in securing a consistent supply of a substance so rare and specialized that its mass production was confined to a single industrial location: heavy water, deuterium, a compound chemically identical to normal water but contains a deuterium atom instead of protium. This seemingly trivial difference makes it an ideal neutron moderator, a substance capable of slowing down the high-speed neutrons released during uranium fission without absorbing them. Without heavy water, the Germans would be forced to use graphite, a material whose suitability was debated by their scientific leadership, severely stalling their research into building a self-sustaining nuclear reactor. Intelligence reports reaching the OSS and SOE confirmed the dire need. Every single drop of heavy water produced in Europe was being earmarked for German research facilities, fueling the nuclear fire. The source was unique: the Norsk Hydro chemical plant near Rjukan, high in occupied Norway. The plant, built pre-war to produce fertilizer, required colossal amounts of cheap hydroelectric power provided by the massive Rjukan-Fossen waterfall, to conduct the complex, energy-intensive electrolysis process that concentrated the heavy water. The urgency was extreme. The Allies calculated that if the Germans could accumulate even 5 tons of heavy water, they could achieve a self-sustaining reaction leading directly to a prototype weapon. The existence of the heavy water facility transformed the Norwegian factory into the single most strategically vital target in the entire European theater. Stopping heavy water production was not just an option. It was the difference between maintaining the integrity of civilization and risking utter annihilation. The response was a desperate scramble for expertise. The problem wasn't logistics, it was physics, geology, and survival. The solution required bridging the gap between theoretical chemistry and high-stakes commando warfare, pitting the silent ingenuity of a small strike team against the entire scientific and military apparatus of the Third Reich.
The Vemork facility was not merely a target. It was an engineering testament to human determination and nature's defensive power. The plant was deliberately situated for resource maximization, resulting in a geographical fortress that defied conventional military assault. It sat perched 1,000 feet above the valley floor, constructed directly onto a massive, sheer cliff face overlooking the deep, inaccessible Mona Gorge carved by the river below. The structure itself was a citadel of reinforced concrete designed to withstand the harsh Norwegian subarctic climate and contain the immense industrial pressures of the electrolysis process. Within this towering complex, the most vital section, the high-concentration plant, hydrogen production house, where the heavy water cells were housed, was sealed inside the deepest, most fortified section of the building. Access was a labyrinth of locked doors, steel stairwells, and secure checkpoints. The layered defenses made any frontal approach functionally impossible. The Mona Gorge, the primary natural defense, was sheer, near-vertical cliffs plunging hundreds of feet into the freezing river. Any attempt to ascend or descend the gorge face was considered suicidal by the German military engineers who surveyed the site. The bridge and road, the only vehicular access, was via a single suspension bridge spanning the gorge leading directly from the town of Rjukan. This bridge was perpetually illuminated by floodlights, monitored by machine gun posts, and reportedly rigged with demolition charges. The garrison, a sizable, highly vigilant German garrison, was quartered nearby, maintaining towers and patrolling the perimeter with dogs. The soldiers were under strict orders to protect the facility at all costs. The flak. While heavy bombing was difficult due to the narrow gorge, the surrounding area was equipped with anti-aircraft batteries to prevent any obvious aerial assault. Professor Tronstad's critical analysis, based on his deep knowledge of the plant's structural flaws and the surrounding geology, was the foundation of the mission. An aerial bombardment would be inexact and risk contaminating the valley with ammonia or other toxic chemicals without guaranteeing the destruction of the vital cells. A ground assault was out of the question. The only viable entry point was the plant's blind side, the rear cliff face that abutted the gorge. This section was unguarded because the architects deemed it naturally impassable. The plan solidified into the necessity of a surgical, clandestine strike. A small team of specialized mountaineers would have to successfully descend the northern face of the gorge, cross the Mona River, and then climb the terrifyingly sheer, icy southern cliff face onto the plant's restricted perimeter. The mission was predicated on overcoming an engineering impossibility through sheer human determination and climbing skill. The plant was a fortress, and the Norwegian Commandos were tasked with scaling its impossible walls under the shadow of the atomic bomb.
The strategic nightmare of the Vemork plant required an unprecedented level of Allied collaboration and intellectual rigor. The strategic command was held by the British SOE, but the mission received crucial logistical and technical support from the burgeoning American OSS, Office of Strategic Services. The OSS provided specialized cutting-edge equipment, high-grade explosives, and secure communications, lending critical industrial weight to the guerrilla operation. The core intellectual engine driving the raid was Professor Leif Tronstad, the scientist who had designed the plant's critical sections. Tronstad, living in exile in England, was the only man alive who could accurately blueprint the sabotage. He created meticulous, hand-drawn diagrams that became the Commandos' Bible. Floor plans, ventilation shafts, pipe locations, and, most crucially, the precise location of the 18 electrolysis concentration cells where the heavy water was manufactured. Tronstad insisted on surgical precision. The goal was not to destroy the building, but to destroy the irreplaceable, delicate platinum-lined cells and the adjacent vital piping, rendering the high-concentration plant useless for months. OSS chemists and demolitions experts played a key role in designing the specific charges. They discarded conventional explosives in favor of a specialized plastic explosive designed to create maximum focused shockwave damage without unnecessary blast radius. The charges were small, no bigger than a roll of coins, and tailored with special magnetic or adhesive backs, ensuring they could be placed quickly and reliably directly onto the steel cells. The mission, Operation Gunnerside, was the final, desperate iteration following the catastrophic failure of Operation Freshman. The planners now understood that heavy casualties were guaranteed with any large force. The solution was the exact opposite: minimalism, expertise, and silence. They would deploy only 6 commandos, all native Norwegians, chosen for their unparalleled knowledge of the Telemark wilderness, their proficiency on skis, and their absolute mastery of mountaineering and cold weather survival. The planning incorporated months of meticulous detail, studying weather patterns. They needed low cloud cover for the drop, but clear ground fog for the approach, practicing parachute jumps in freezing conditions, and rehearsing the plant's layout with a full-scale wooden replica built in a secret training facility in the Scottish Highlands. The entire mission hinged on bypassing technology and relying on the ancient skills of climbing and stealth, augmented by the most modern, highly specialized explosives. The weight of the world's nuclear balance rested on the success of these 10 men and the fidelity of Tronstad's hand-drawn lines.
The initial attempt to execute the sabotage, Operation Freshman, remains a chilling testament to the unforgiving nature of the mission's logistics and the brutal reality of the Commando Order. Launched in November 1942, the plan involved delivering a large, secondary demolition team of 30 Royal Engineers and Norwegian Commandos via gliders towed by RAF Halifax bombers. The decision to use gliders was made to ensure the men could carry heavy demolition equipment and have a large, organized force ready for the immediate assault. However, it was a profound miscalculation of the environment. Logistical nightmare. towing heavy, unpowered gliders across the turbulent, icy North Sea and over the jagged peaks of the Telemark Mountains was fraught with peril. The gliders' vulnerability. Gliders, built of wood and canvas, were highly susceptible to structural failure and devastating icing in the subarctic climate. The operation was a descent into chaos. Severe icing and turbulence over Norway's rugged coast forced the first bomber to cut its glider loose prematurely. The glider crashed violently into the mountainside, killing most aboard instantly. The few survivors, badly injured, were quickly discovered and captured by German patrols. The second bomber-glider combination fared no better. The thick, unpredictable mountain fog prevented the bomber pilot from visually confirming the landing zone. The glider was released blind, crashing miles away from the designated area. The surviving commandos were rounded up within hours. The aftermath was tragic and criminal. The captured men, all uniformed Allied soldiers, were interrogated for intelligence. Then, under Hitler's barbaric Commando Order, which demanded the immediate secret execution of any captured sabotage or commando unit, the survivors were cruelly murdered by the Gestapo. Their bodies were disposed of, and the incident was utterly suppressed by the Germans, who sought to use the execution to terrorize future resistance efforts. Operation Freshman was a total failure, costing the Allies 30 lives and demonstrating with horrifying clarity that large conventional insertions were impossible. The failure sent a shockwave through Allied command, but it provided a vital negative lesson. Success could only be achieved through stealth, minimalism, and relying entirely on the unique survival skills of the native Norwegians. The next team to go in knew they would receive no mercy. Their parachute jump was effectively a one-way ticket.
The planning for Operation Gunnerside was executed with the grim determination born of the Freshman tragedy. The team was reduced to 6 men, led by Lieutenant Joachim Ronneberg, all hand-picked Norwegian commandos. They were forged into a weapon designed to survive and kill in the most hostile environment on Earth. Their specialized training, conducted by SOE experts in the remote snowy highlands of Scotland, was relentless. It was focused less on standard infantry drills and more on the specialized skills required for vertical assault and sustained survival. The demolition art, they spent weeks practicing demolitions on a mock-up of the Famork plant's electrolysis room, learning precisely where to place the small plastic explosives to destroy the apparatus without igniting the highly volatile hydrogen gas byproduct that constantly filled the plant's atmosphere. They had to achieve destruction with minimal mass and noise. The survival gauntlet, they lived for weeks in the Scottish wilderness, existing on reindeer meat, sparse rations delivered by air, and melting snow for water. They mastered long-range skiing, navigating by the stars and geological features, knowing that once the sabotage was complete, their escape would be a desperate 2-week cross-country trek to neutral Sweden. Acoustic control. They practiced silent movement and communication, focusing on suppressing the smallest sounds, the squeak of cold leather, the click of a climbing carabiner, or the crunch of a boot on frozen snow. Their lives depended on their ability to move like ghosts across the pristine, sound-amplifying silence of the snow-covered plateau. The mission began in February 1943. The 6 commandos successfully parachuted onto the Hardanger Plateau, a vast, frozen, barren wilderness in Telemark. They linked up with the 4-man advance team, Operation Grouse and Swallows, who had been living like isolated Arctic hunters for months, enduring continuous blizzards, sub-zero temperatures, and the constant threat of aerial reconnaissance. The combined force of 10 men established their base in a network of expertly constructed snow caves, igloo-like structures that offered protection from the funwind, fierce, drying winds, and invisibility from the air. Their primary task became patience, monitoring the German patrol routes, tracking the unpredictable winter weather, and awaiting the perfect night. A confluence of low cloud cover near the plant, a clear drop zone now long past, and minimum visible moonlight. They were a tiny, isolated army, subsisting on hoarded supplies and absolute mutual trust, knowing that the smallest mistake by any one man could result in the death of the entire team. The night of February 27, 1943 was deemed the night of minimum risk. clear at elevation, but with localized ground fog settling over the gorge, offering a visual shield. Moving on skis, the 10 Commandos approached the northern rim of the Mana Gorge. The air was intensely cold, amplifying the sound of the fierce wind whipping through the valley. The descent was terrifying. The first man over the edge, carrying specialized pitons and a lightweight rope supplied by the OSS, began the slow, torturous climb down the 600-foot gorge wall. The slope was icy and treacherously slick with frozen snow, turning the maneuver into an exercise in controlled falling. The men were acutely aware that the slightest vibration or mistake could dislodge loose rock, which would send an audible signal echoing across the valley to the guard posts. They successfully reached the bottom, crossing the Mana River by carefully stepping across the semi-frozen, ice-choked water. The silence of the gorge was only broken by the distant, thunderous roar of the Rjukan-Fossen waterfall, a natural sound that ironically aided them by masking the slight sounds of their climbing gear. The second obstacle was the near-vertical 500-foot cliff face that led up to the plant's perimeter. This was the blind side, deemed impassable by German engineers. The team used specialized high-tension climbing gear, hammering pitons into the frozen rock and scaling the sheer face in absolute agonizing silence. The extreme cold burned their exposed hands, and the constant stress threatened to tear the muscles in their legs and backs. At the summit, they reached the single point of access, the chain-link fence separating the cliff face from the plant's perimeter. This section, due to the natural barrier, was the only part of the fence not wired with trip flares or explosives. They cut the wire and slipped onto the perimeter ground. The team split. 4 men took up overwatch and diversionary positions, while the 6-man demolition team, led by Ronneberg, approached the main structure. They discovered the critical moment of negligence. The heavily secured main gate was locked, but a smaller maintenance tunnel used for running heavy electrical cables into the basement was found unsecured, possibly due to German overconfidence or a shift change error. The small elite sabotage team disappeared into the belly of the concrete fortress, their breath clouding in the freezing air, the success of the mission resting on the fidelity of Tronstad's diagrams and their ability to move as ghosts through the labyrinthine plant. Once inside the echoing, sterile environment of the electrolysis building, the demolition team relied entirely on muscle memory and the meticulously memorized diagrams provided by Professor Tronstad. They moved through the complex maze of high-voltage wiring, massive piping, and industrial machinery, guided only by the specific hum of the electrical transformers they knew surrounded the critical area. Their objective was the high-concentration, heavy water room, a tightly sealed chamber that contained the 18 platinum-lined electrolysis cells. The atmosphere inside was slightly hazardous due to the constant presence of hydrogen gas byproduct, a silent, volatile threat. They located the steel door, and Ronberg and Poulsen used silent tools to defeat the multiple heavy-duty locks. Inside, the room was a chilling tableau of industrial precision. The tall, delicate stack of cells stood as the centerpiece, humming faintly. The German sentry was confirmed absent. The Commandos worked with the surgical speed they had rehearsed for months. They did not attempt to destroy the massive steel cells themselves, which was impractical. Instead, they focused on the most vulnerable, irreplaceable components, the exchange plates and the critical plumbing leading in and out of the cells. They used their specialized plastic charges, applying them directly to the key pipes and the base of the cell stack, designed to ensure maximum shockwave damage to the delicate internal components. Ronberg set the fuses with a 2-minute delay, the bare minimum required to ensure their escape. Crucially, before leaving the room, they took the time to open a nearby outer window. This act was deliberately engineered to vent the explosion shockwave outward, rather than allowing it to travel back through the ventilation system, which would alert the German guards prematurely and reveal the direction of their escape. The team retreated through the maintenance tunnel and scrambled over the perimeter fence. Just as they reached the plateau, the muffled crumph of the explosion echoed across the valley. The noise was surprisingly contained, muffled by the thick concrete walls, achieving the surgical result intended. The critical heavy water cells were pulverized and shattered, and the remaining heavy water inventory poured out onto the floor. The German garrison was thrown into immediate confusion, but they were searching a structure that to the naked eye appeared largely intact. The Commandos immediately entered escape mode, discarding their heavy packs and switching to their escape skis. Their job was done. They had struck a crippling blow to the German atomic program, leaving behind only a smoking wreckage of platinum and shattered dreams.
The success of the Gunnerside raid was instantly confirmed by Allied intelligence, and its impact was immediate and profound. The meticulous surgical strike completely halted heavy water production at Vemmerk. The Germans, astonished by the sheer audacity and efficiency of the sabotage, estimated that the repair and replacement of the specialized cells would take at least a year, forcing a catastrophic delay in the Uranverein program. The German response was massive and focused. They initiated a relentless manhunt across the Telemark wilderness, but the Commandos, moving on skis across the vast, featureless plateau, had vanished completely, relying on their survival training and the pre-stocked supply caches orchestrated by the OSS. The escape was a legendary feat of endurance, skiing over 250 miles in sub-zero temperatures, surviving solely on what they could carry and find until they reached the safety of neutral Sweden. The victory, however, was not complete until the final act. When the Germans realized the extent of the delay, they attempted to ship the surviving stock of heavy water, the remaining inventory, and the partially purified heavy water back to Germany via rail and ferry. The Gunnerside team, alerted to this transfer, orchestrated one final devastating act of sabotage, placing charges on the ferry, the DF Hydro, as it crossed the deep Tinjo Lake. On February 20th, 1944, the ferry was sunk, ensuring that all remaining heavy water and the hopes of the German atomic program was permanently lost to the bottom of the lake. The ultimate legacy of Operation Gunnerside is clear. It was one of the most strategically decisive sabotage missions of the entire war. It successfully bought the Allies the crucial time needed to develop the atomic bomb without the constant, terrifying threat of a German counterweapon. The success was a triumph of intelligence, scientific planning, Tronstedt's diagrams, and the almost unbelievable courage and expertise of the 10 Norwegian Commandos. The mission remained classified for decades, the heroic acts kept secret to protect the remaining resistance members and the highly sensitive methods of the OSS SOE. The Commandos received high honors, including the Distinguished Service Order and the Military Cross, but the full, terrifying details of their climb up the impassable fortress remained largely unknown until decades after the war. They proved that human ingenuity and determination, backed by precise scientific knowledge, could overcome a logistical and military impossibility, saving the world from the shadow of the atomic nightmare.